In 1955, a young man came from Akron, Ohio, to Wallaston, Massachusetts. And it wasn't me. It was Lowell Hall. And
I was only 3 at the time.
yeah. But like me and several other of my colleagues, he returned to this place. I can see some others who have. He returned to this place in 1967, 1 year ahead of my entrance to ENC. Dr. Lowell Hall is a retired, well, you're still teaching occasionally?
No, just research and writing.
He's an emeritus professor of chemistry. We don't have time for a full introduction, but let me just say that he has been one of the stalwarts on this faculty for decades, upholding the banner of Christian higher education and participation in his field at the highest levels in the country, and inspiring people, faculty members, to realize that a career at ENC does not necessarily entail a sacrifice of one's professional aspirations and activities. And so he's been an inspiration to scores of faculty members. We have Professor Coleman here. I'm calling him professor because he does teach in the pre-law program, who started off our festivities, our events last night with a tremendous talk. And the common thread here, I think, I don't need to tell you what he's going to say, is on Christian liberal arts education, the importance of it. So without any further intro from me, Professor Hall.
Thank you, Don. I do want to congratulate those of you who are here. Some of you, all of you participated, but some were presenters, some were faithful listeners, and both are really necessary. Don, I was thinking about maybe the first time I spoke in chapel after returning there. I don't know if you were in chapel that day or not. Chapel was held in the lower level of the Wollaston Church because the upper level wasn't built yet. Now, it was very similar. There's a choir loft. Behind the choir loft was a baptismal tank and a red curtain in front of it. So it was very nice looking. So I was beginning to speak, and I always like to make eye contact with people. So if I look at you tonight, smile, and look back so I think you're awake. So I was looking out across the auditorium, and it was very clear to me that most students were not looking at me. They were looking beyond me. Now, what is back there? A red curtain. So I went on for a little bit and looked up again, and they're still looking back there and giggling. So I thought, well, I guess I'd better turn around and find out what's going on. I turned around, the red curtain was pulled back. And there, on a stool, sitting in the empty baptismal tank, was the biology department skeleton. We called him Fred. And Fred was wired up and waving his hand. So now what do I do? As a proper professor, I'm supposed to maintain decorum. What do I do in this situation? So I turned back, and most of the students had got kind of quiet, and they were really looking right at me. What's he going to do? Why? There was only one thing to do. I turned around and said, "Hi, Fred." Somebody closed the curtains, and we went on. Now, I tell that story because humor is very often based on the unexpected. You make a joke from it, which is what I try to do. But tonight I want to take that idea in a very different direction. Life is filled with the unexpected, and humor is often helpful. But more than that, I want to recommend taking advantage of the unexpected on our journey. Last night, Sean told us about getting into the game. Maybe this is staying in the game. Because I want to recommend for you 2 pairs of travel companions. appearance and reality, those are familiar words, and chronos and kairos, and only Bill Malice will know those two words because they're Greek. Now, from my point of view, there's only one obvious place to start this talk, and that's God's creation. And it's not what it appears to be on the surface. It's much more wonderful and unexpected than we actually imagine. So, for example, right now, think about how fast are you moving? Now, to any educated person before the 17th century, the answer to that question was very obvious. The earth is motionless. And for you right now, do you feel any motion? So in reality, you live like the earth is sitting still. But we know that the earth is spinning 1,000 miles an hour during its daily orbit, during its daily rotation. And we're going 66,000 miles an hour in the orbit around the sun. But you ask, we don't feel this. How could that possibly be? How is it we stick to the Earth's surface without flying out off into space? Well, now the answer we give is a concept that we cannot handle and we cannot see. We just give it a name, gravity. Now, before 1926, we also all knew there's only one galaxy, our galaxy, the Milky Way. Obvious? Yeah, you know that. However, in 1924, some astronomers, including Edwin Hubble, began to reveal that the Milky Way is not the only galaxy. That point of light that we have called Andromeda is not a star. It's a galaxy. Appearance, reality. Those are companions, can be helpful companions on your journey. In fact, it's now estimated that there's more than 100 billion galaxies, each with more than 100 billion stars. And so we ask, how can our universe be so immense? Can we be so small? Are we also insignificant? But we know a reality that goes along with these appearances. The heavens declare the glory of God. And John 3:16 says, for God so loved the world that he gave. Let's take this in a little different direction. All life systems, including you and me, consist of these invisible things we call atoms. There's much more beneath the surface than we usually think. Now, how do we understand the appearances around us? Well, we think about these invisible quantities, these objects. Even more unbelievable is the fact that atoms are mainly empty space. Well, Luke and I would agree that, if you wish, they're filled with electric fields. Your dad's forgotten about that by now, but you and I know. No, maybe you. So, all life systems, including you and me, consist of these invisible molecules in a dynamic interactions at hard-to-imagine speeds. Our digestion is a cascade of chemical reactions, DNA codes for making protein enzymes to manage all of that. And right now, the digestion of our dinners. Now, beyond that, most biological molecules have a very specific shape to accomplish their job. And some have shapes that correspond to the symmetry of right hand and left hand, mirror images of each other. But the interesting thing is that sugars and amino acids in our bodies are only of the right-handed variety. Now, two chemists, Van Hoff and Lebel, explained this effect. I'm sure you all know this. It's the tetrahedral arrangement in space around carbon atoms. And they won the Nobel Prize in 1901. You should know that. You're liberal arts students here. Now, the leading physical chemist in Europe at the time, Hermann Kolbe, ridiculed them for this statement, quote, for arranging philosophical entities in space and for taking a flight of fantasy on Pegasus, the horse statue at the universe where Van Hoff taught. So don't feel too bad if you don't understand this either. Overall, to us humans, most of this actually seems impossible. We are in motion, we don't feel it. Solid matter is mostly empty space. Invisible things support visible life processes, and the shape of these invisible things is important. So what we see directly, stars, flowers, our own bodies, is appearance. For reality, that is for understanding, we look beneath all of that. I'll change the direction a bit here. this evening I'm also thinking about my high school days. Now in high school, I did enjoy learning, but believe me, I also greatly enjoyed my friends. And that friendship activity was often most visible during study hall. A large group of students got in the library. We were supposed to do homework or read a book. Yeah, but we often made secret codes and passed secret messages. The content didn't matter, we just wanted to be secret. We played Battleship, passing our attack codes on paper. There were no computers or cell phones. Everything's on paper. So one day near the beginning of my sophomore year, my Latin teacher, Mr. Charles Howard, was in charge of the study hall. Now it was in his class, he was one of my very best teachers, that I think I first began to understand the English language. But unfortunately for me in study hall, he was of the old school, a no-nonsense teacher. So at the end of study hall, one day he called me to the front desk. He said, "Mr. Hall, you were talking, not studying. You will do detention, 4 days in my classroom." There was no court of appeals with Mr. Howard. So I went to his room after school, made some homework. Very soon several juniors and seniors walked in. I knew these were outstanding students. How did Mr. Howard get you guys, I wondered? You know, maybe I'm in pretty good company here. Then I watched in amazement as Mr. Howard began to teach them Greek, doing vocabulary, grammar, syntax. They began to translate Plato's Apology. You know, Plato's version of Socrates' defense before 399 BC. You know about that, right? No. See, if I look at you, you see, nod your head. My homework was forgotten as I listened in. After my 4-day detention, I asked Mr. Howard, how did these guys get in here to study Greek? He told me they were invited, and only the best and most disciplined students were ever invited. He gave me his inimitable look, which told me clearly, and you are not one of those. I was crushed. But in fact, that became a Kairos moment, K-A-I-R-O-S, if you do the English translation, an opportunity time when I stepped up my motivation and self-defense. And at the end of the year, I had earned straight A's in Latin. And would you believe it? Mr. Howard invited me to join his Greek class. He smiled that teacher's smile, knowing he had worked that teacher's magic and helped another student to wake up to his potential. And I looked at these guys here knowing they've had the same privilege as I've had here at ENC. Now, Chronos, you might guess, is the meticulous, unrelenting passage of time which we do not control. The repeating sound of the clock, the silent beating of the atomic clock. But in that Greek class, I found a new, time was really flying. I found a new vision of time from the Greek word kairos. That moment when I asked Mr. Howard if I could join his Greek class, and he gave me that look, that was kairos. A moment of revelation and opportunity, a moment that could have turned me away or could have stepped up my motivation. I seized that opportunity, and that kairos moment is still with me. So kairos is the unpredictable but opportunity-filled moment that intersects with the utterly predictable march of time. Kairos is a teachable moment, a moment in time that becomes timeless. Now, I do not claim to know Greek. However, those experiences in Greek and Latin and also in German have given me a deep appreciation for language. And here we come to a liberal arts issue, especially issues involved in attempting to put words in one language and one culture into words in another language and another culture. And for me as a Christian, that's very important because guess what? Scripture was written in ancient Hebrew and ancient Greek that nobody even talks anymore. So I guess it's not too weird that an aspiring chemist would be attracted to Greek. Now, Chronos is marching on tonight, yes. So I better get moving on here. I would like to talk about my ENC experiences, like dating on this campus, especially that wonderful and attractive young woman, Dorla, that I have a date with in a little bit. Our first date, yes, I think I need to tell a little story here. It's a long story, so I got to tell just this much of it. We went to Park Street for Boston Youth Time, which is sort of like Youth for Christ. They had a great music program. So we drove in, we got into church, about ready to sit down, and Dorla was wearing this smashing outfit. Long coat, tailored. She was wearing a teal dress with little flowers on it. Now this is March 1957, and I still can see that picture in my mind. What does that tell you? So I'm a gentleman, I'm gonna help her off with the coat. So I started to take the coat off, and much to my horror, it looked like the dress material was coming off too. It's sort of like that, It's a Wonderful Life moment. So I stopped, I hesitated, but then she didn't seem to resist, so I kept going. And then I noticed that the coat was lined with the same dress material. That's what was coming off. And so I said to her, you know, you really look great this evening. What a wonderful outfit. And she just very simply said to me, yes, I made it. I thought, you know, this is somebody I'm going to pay attention to. I think she's a pretty good cat. And she is. So our first date, our first kiss, my first and only marriage proposal, and now 53 years of wonderful, happy marriage, and many, many Kairos moments, and I better move on. We came here in 1967. In 1975, I was eligible for my first sabbatical leave. Based on my previous experiences, I put together the perfect sabbatical plan. It says right here in bold type, the perfect sabbatical plan. Right there it is. 15 months at UCLA, a very good salary, very interesting research, wonderful travel experiences with our family, and worshiping with Reverend Earl Lee at Pasadena First Church. What could be better? But God had a very different Kairos moment for us. God let us know through our prayers UCLA was not his plan. But I saw this as opportunity lost. In fact, to be perfectly honest with you, I was really angry with God. That's not metaphor. I resisted strongly, to put it mildly. However, in a fiction story I once wrote, I put these words into the mouth of a pastor. No one who has never wrestled with God can claim to know God. And I still think my fictional character got it right. So I surrendered my perfect plan to God's perfect grace. And that's the time I met Professor Lamont B. Keir at Massachusetts College of Pharmacy. That's a very long story, but it's led to 38 years of collaborative research, grants, publications. However, furthermore, currently I'm engaged in an NIH-sponsored research project to identify human endogenous metabolites. A key part of this research relies on the modeling method pioneered and developed during those years when I did not follow my perfect plan, but instead followed God's perfect plan and relied on God's perfect grace. In 2002, one of my students, E&C freshman Sarah Taylor, died very suddenly. Another different and very difficult Kairos time occurred. A tree was planted on campus in her memory, and I wrote a memorial for her, and here's part of what I wrote. I shall always carry a fond memory of Sarah. Pictures of her celebrating the end of first semester and the coming of Christmas, along with other students at our Christmas party in our home. I remember her laughter during our silly ping pong game, her shared frustration while trying to solve one of my wooden puzzles with a friend. Remember? Joining with the group in playing one of our word games. She was especially at home with her friends, a person easy to like. She is stuck there in my mind's eye. When I think of Sarah's passing as a fellow human being, I want answers. In our general chemistry class, Sarah learned about the structure of atoms and molecules and the progress of chemical reactions so that we could give a good explanation of what we observed in the lab. A well-done explanation is very satisfying, and I share that experience with my students. When I think of Sarah's passing, I call it untimely. I say she died too young, and I want an answer. My first instinct drives me to look for the same kind of answer that I give for homework problems. Some bit of logic help me feel better. but it is not satisfying. Instead, I seek the everlasting arms of Father God and I cry, right now. In the arms of God, I do not find the answer that I was looking for. In that time of solace, the love of the Father, whose only Son died, finds me instead. The answer I need is not a bit of logic, but is indeed a person, our Lord Jesus Christ. And over time, the need for that unfound answer fades. Father's love brightens. So what I see here is reality transcending appearances in another Kairos moment. And finally, perhaps you know the book and the movie, The Freedom Rider's Diary. Anybody seen the book or seen the book or read the movie? This is based on a true story, a teacher named Erin Grunwell. She worked with underprivileged high school students as an English teacher. And she was finding great enthusiasm and progress in her students in their writing. It's a powerful story. However, school authorities did not want her to continue with that group into their junior year. She was very discouraged because of these obstacles, and she thought this would really hinder the progress of her students. In desperation, she goes to her father to talk about both her commitment and the great obstacles. Maybe you remember the sentence, it just jumped out at me. Her father said, "Erin, you are blessed with a burden." For our blessing/burdens, our mission in life, with both opportunities and obstacles, we need to be ready to recognize Kairos moments, even as Chronos marches on. And so what I say to you tonight, stay in the game. May you discover the reality beneath the appearances, ready to enjoy the blessings that do come with the burdens, and experience the joy of our journey. And now I have a date. If any of you would like to talk to me about any of this, I'll be glad to send you a copy, or you can come to my office over in Schrader Hall. I would be delighted to follow up, and I really wish I could stay if you have any questions. But good evening.